Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Porn Brain Rewire. I am Dr. Trish Leigh. Thank you for joining me. And today I have a special guest. Will Richards is with me. He's going to introduce himself in just a second, but we are here to have a very stimulating, no pun intended, or maybe the pun is intended, conversation on erectile dysfunction. And we're going to kind of chunk it into three categories. The first category is going to be the types of erectile dysfunction. Number two is going to be how you deal with erectile dysfunction in different situations, hookup situations, being with a partner that you care about, someone new, or in an established relationship. And lastly, we're going to talk about number three is we're going to talk about how therapy or coaching or support can help you if you struggle with erectile dysfunction. So I'm going to hand it over to Will, and he can introduce himself and tell us your credentials. And thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it. So I am a writer by profession. I'm 49 years old. The reason why I came across your work is that I myself have suffered from erectile dysfunction for about 7 years. And I took it pretty seriously in the sense of wanting to figure out how to make it stop. Mm-hmm. And also took a sort of holistic approach to it. So not really wanting to use pharmaceuticals, especially as a way to solve the problem. I know in some of your other podcasts, you've mentioned those are more of a masking agent than something that actually
for most people I work with, it doesn't even work for them because that's not what's needed. So yes.
So I had this between 42 and 48, I would say, 49, and I believe I've solved at least my ED. Although I'm willing to understand that it might come back, but I do feel like even if it does come back, I have a lot better tools to deal with it than I did when it started. And when I first had it, it was incredibly confusing, disorienting.
Can I just, sorry, I shouldn't be interrupting you, but why do you think it might come back? What is that about?
Because I think for me, my erectile dysfunction was what I call sort of psychological and emotional in nature. Mm-hmm. And I think that who knows where a person's psychology and a person's emotions will lead in the future. So I'm not trying to make a negative prediction that it will come back, but I'm just sort of being gentle on myself that if it did come back, it would be okay.
And that's what I teach people is what I'm trying to help people with is improve their baseline neurological regulation, get their brain in a better place, baseline, but then learn the tools that in the moments that you really need it, either you can prevent yourself from tipping over into, in this case, erectile dysfunction, or if you start to see you're at the precipice and you're starting to experience it, you know exactly how to bring yourself back. And those are the tools you need.
Yes.
We can dig into that for sure.
Exactly. And then after kind of finding a way through this issue, it led me to write a couple of books on the subject. One is a novel where the main character, one of his qualities is that he's suffering from erectile dysfunction, and he's talking to a psychologist and really doesn't know what's happening or why it's happening to him. And the other is a self-help guide in the hopes that other people are not left in the way I was, feeling very alone and isolated. And I think that's true of a lot of the work that you're doing, to be able to help people through sort of a really unpleasant and challenging, male sexual problem.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of sirens around here, if you can hear them. Yeah, definitely. And it is so lonely and so confusing. And from my perspective, when porn's in the mix, and we can dig into this in a bit, is that people don't understand what the underpinning, at the core, what is happening. So then when they go to practitioners don't even know when porn's in the mix and it's not being talked about. And so then how do you possibly get to solution if you don't know what the parameters are? And so, like you said, the whole thing's very confusing. And hopefully as we keep talking, and perhaps I could put it to you, if we, in sticking with kind of our three categories that we're going to move through, what would you say the types of erectile dysfunction are?
Well, I think when I look at it, there's sort of three.
Okay.
One is, and this is what, you know, what I suffered from and what my books really deal with, which is psycho-emotional erectile dysfunction. So there's something happening in your brain and in your emotions that is preventing you from getting an erection when you want to. So that would be the first one. The second would be physical erectile dysfunction. So there's something within your physiology that is preventing you from being able to get an erection. And the third one would be porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So you're basically addicted to porn, and therefore your brain doesn't let you get an erection in a real life situation. And for me, the distinction between those three is quite simple. So if you can get an erection when you masturbate or when you look at porn, you don't have a physical problem. Like, your body will allow you to get an erection. If you cannot get an erection in any of those situations, you probably have a physical problem, and go see your doctor. From what I understand, if you cannot get an erection at all, it could be an indicator that you might have problems like an impending heart attack or something like that. So you really want to go to your doctor if that's the case. If you can't.
Yeah, and I would contend that's like 1% of the population. I'm making that number up, but it's a very small percentage of the population. And a question, or I guess a question/comment would be that physiological, to me, psycho-emotional and physiological all come from your brain. So unless it's at the cellular or at the nerve or at the vascular level, that isn't necessarily a brain control thing. And that happens to a very small percentage of people, because I work with people who get to a point that their brains won't allow them to get an erection in any circumstance, but physiologically from the brain down, everything is actually fine. It's just the reward center in their brain and the reward pathways are so damaged. There's no level of arousal that can get them there. It's an arousal issue, not necessarily a cellular issue or a vascular or a, yeah. And so but there are people, so you're right. That is the first route that I would encourage everybody, if you're not able to, go have all of that checked out. And what happens in my work is when people come to me and they're like, I've gone to the urologist, I've gone to the cardiologist, I've gone to this doctor and that doctor, everything in my body is fine. And it's like everything except your brain. And what I've learned, a reason that I am now currently on my erectile dysfunction mission, is because if you followed my content, I have unfortunately been dealing with neurotoxin poisoning from mold poisoning. Mold in my home that I didn't know about. And mold is a neurotoxin. Neurotoxins are poisons that will put your nervous system into autonomic nervous system dysfunction. And the reason I bring it up is because I've been doing a truckload of research on how to heal myself at the cellular level, because I do have cellular dysfunction from being neurotoxin poisoned. Porn does the same thing, which is totally wild to me, that it's not a physical neurotoxin, it's a psychological or a dopaminergic neurotoxin, basically, that can make it so that you can literally get cellular dysfunction. So it does become a twofer for people that I work with when porn's in the mix, because it is physiological at the brain level, but then that cascading effect through neurotransmitters, hormones, peripheral nervous system, which your brain controls your vascular system too. And so even at the cellular level, there's nitric oxide involved. And it really, I had epiphany moments while I was studying this in terms of neurotoxin poisoning. I'm like, this is what's happening in erectile dysfunction. I connected dots between like brain performance and body performance.
Mhm.
So to
That makes sense.
me, basically, all three of them are very, very similar if porn's in the mix. If porn isn't in the mix, and then you have these physiological conditions, like there's something else at play. But if porn is in the mix, you need to take porn out of the mix and then reevaluate it.
Yeah, that would make sense to me for sure.
And then from the cycle, you've already kind of touched upon from the psycho-emotional standpoint, there's performance anxiety. And that's something we're going to dig into in the strategies that I'm dying to hear what your strategies are. You know, when you know, or you have fear that there might be erectile dysfunction and you approach being with someone, that performance anxiety piece ramps your brain up and basically makes it so that you are at more risk for erectile dysfunction.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I definitely suffered from as well, because I think once as a man, once you have this problem once, at least for me, you know, I would walk around downtown Montreal and the thoughts in my brain were, you know, the next time I'm with this person, am I going to be able to get it up? Am I going to be able to get an erection? And you'd be worrying about it all the time. And the closer that event was about to happen, the more and more you would be worried.
Definitely,
At the
it's
same
so
time,
bad.
though, yeah, it's super. It's kind of all your brain is thinking about. At the same time, so when I started to study why I had ED and why, because my ED was quite intermittent. So sometimes there would be some situations that I would have it, and then other situations I wouldn't. And that also made me think about, you know, try to understand like why was it in some situations I could get an erection and other situations I couldn't. And it made me realize that although a lot of attention is focused on performance anxiety, I really feel at the end of it, it's a bit of a red herring. And the reason for that is that the first time you have ED, you don't have performance anxiety and you get it anyway. So if you don't solve that underpinning of what the issue is, then you'll be stuck in this sort of cycle of performance anxiety. But you have to get, and on top of that, I would say that solutions for performance anxiety, in my case, just ramped up the anxiety. So people would tell me, okay, you need to relax. So then I'd be thinking, okay, am I relaxed? Like relax, you know, do breath work, do these things. And of course, it just made you more conscious of your body and more conscious of your penis and more conscious of the fact that nothing was happening. Yeah. So it was really like I think focusing on performance anxiety is as much of a you know, as a red herring as it is to, you know, take a pill to solve the problem. Like you've got to go beneath that. And what I looked at when I went through my thought process as to, you know, for me, it was a mystery. Like I was in a marriage for 15 years, didn't have any problems with ED. I left the marriage. A month later, I couldn't get it up. Like, what is happening? And I was so excited to be with this new person. I was so excited to be, you know, kind of free again. And yet I couldn't get it up. And then I had different situations like that. And then I got in another more serious relationship. My problem went away. And then I got out of that relationship. The problem came back. So it's very much like this up and down sort of wave. And also I found it, I guess what I realized is that the key for this psycho-emotional ED was intimacy. That if there was intimacy there, and if there was intimacy between the two people, that I was probably not going to have a problem. But then the question became, well, how do you create intimacy? And especially in the context of a dating situation where you might not know somebody very, very well, or perhaps you want to have more casual sex. How do you create intimacy, and why is intimacy important? And one of the things I realized is that if I were to meet somebody casually, but for whatever reason I had to seduce that person. So I had to do certain things like, I don't know, when I seduce somebody, I probably do the same thing every time. Like
I'll say, let's hear your tips.
I'm gonna try to make you laugh. You know, I'm gonna try to make you laugh. That's the first thing. And then if you laugh, and if I'm making little jokes and that's going well, then I'm gonna invite you over for dinner. And if that's going well, then I'm gonna play something for you on my guitar. I'll sing you a song. And when I thought about,
okay,
like,
ladies, if any ladies are listening and you see these moves, get ready.
That's right. That's right. And I thought, like, okay, well, what is happening when I do that? And I thought about like I've watched some documentaries on stand-up comedians, and one of the things they say is that when they're up on that stage, they are completely vulnerable. It's them and a microphone. There might be 10 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people watching them, but they are completely, basically naked on that stage. And I thought that was really interesting, because I thought that when I tell those jokes, okay, I'm not at the stage of a master comedian, but I am putting myself out there. I am saying, look, I'm going to do something silly or say something silly in the hopes that you laugh. And if you don't laugh, I'm going to be wounded. My vulnerability is going to be exposed, and that's going to be a problem. So, but if you do laugh, that's going to make me feel good, feel safe, feel like I can go further, and then I can invite you over for dinner. Well, if I invite you over for dinner and cook you food, that's a whole other level of vulnerability. What if you don't like it? What if I mess up? What if I do all these things? So my unconscious is watching what my potential partner is doing and how they're receiving my overtures. And so if there is enough safety created, and if there's enough if I can let my vulnerability go, safety will be created, intimacy will be created, and then I'll get an erection. And if I don't do those things, more than likely I'm going to have problems. And I guess that steps back a little bit to I think, you know, some of the work you're doing with brain functioning and so forth, in the sense that one of the things when I thought about just getting an erection is that it's not a conscious act. Getting an erection is an unconscious act. So I cannot will myself right now in this room to get an erection. I can't do it. And so there's something going on with the unconscious that is very, very important. The unconscious, in my estimation, must feel safe. And the way that unconscious is going to feel safe is to do these seduction moves and have them well received by the woman. So at the end of the day, it made me think, when I seduce a woman, who's being seduced? I'm seducing myself.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I think that's what, you know, I'm sure a lot of the brain reprogramming is about. It's sort of getting into that unconscious place where consciously, you know, you want an erection, but unconsciously it's not happening.
Yeah, that's great. If I can, thank you for sharing all that, because that is really amazing and articulated really well. And I have a couple comments to kind of add to it. And it's really interesting talking with you because you may or may not know, this is kind of the flip side perspective to what most of the people that I work with, because when someone's consumed porn for a really long time, porn's in the mix, their brains are trained through consumption to feel safer with no intimacy, because
Absolutely.
when you watch porn, it's not intimate. So most of the men that I work with, they have no problem getting an erection when they go to masturbate. You already talked about this. When they're viewing porn, which is a hyper arousal type of state, or like for single men, one gentleman, I'm thinking of one gentleman, and who's a perfect example. He's super cute. He was probably like, I don't know, 20 years old, 21 or so. And he's like, if I'm just hooking up with a girl, I have no problem. He's like, but I just met the most amazing girl. And I'm in a consultation. He's like, I really like her and I cannot, do it. I can't perform. And I'm like, it's because of intimacy, because now you feel more vulnerable because you actually care if she's around and you care what she thinks about you. And so that, we'll call it performance anxiety, but I agree with you kind of about the nomenclature around that. But like, then he's more anxious to be with her because he actually cares and he's becoming vulnerable and there's intimacy in the mix. So when it comes with most of the people I work with, intimate sex is what creates erectile dysfunction. And then unfortunately, a healthy coping strategy, an unhealthy, let me say that again, unhealthy coping strategy that men will use when they're trying to be with a partner is to go to fantasy about porn, to be able to take the intimacy piece out of it, sort of like a dissociation type of methodology, so that they aren't being fully present and connected, the opposite of what you're doing. And I love the way you talk about it in terms of, that you're actually seducing yourself. And the way I talk about that is that we all have needs. And when you figure out what you need in a sexual experience and you're willing to do that, and it has to be healthy, because I'm always about unhealthy versus healthy, you're willing to explore that, you feel comfortable with a partner, and you're willing to communicate that to a partner, and you're willing to be really vulnerable. If that other person shows up and is okay with all that, you become invulnerable. And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand, that in a healthy partnership, it's relational and you should be able to do those things. And, we're going to talk about different types of relationships and how that might challenge that parameter. But, the goal is to feel strong and confident, safe and secure while you're being vulnerable and intimate, which is not the easiest thing for people to be able to do. And a lot of people, most times when there's a pornography habit that someone's struggling with, there's intimacy issues that fly under the radar there. And then the language of unconscious, subconscious, and conscious, that's exactly how I talk about all of this brain performance regulation in my work, because unconscious are the body processes. You can't think yourself into certain things. They're physiological in nature. They're unconscious. And everything has to be running well. And when it comes to erectile dysfunction, when porn is part of it, there is an underlying brain pattern that makes it so healthy arousal is difficult to achieve. It's because the brain's in a dysregulated state. A brain that needs hyperarousal can't get healthy arousal. It's just not physically possible, which feels psychological and emotional sometimes. Like what falls out of these dysregulated brain patterns are different emotional states, different psychological processes, and different physical problems. So like, that's why they're all kind of one for me when it comes to people who are caught in a porn habit. But then some is subconscious, like, all these fears of intimacy. If you kind of peel a layer back, you might recognize some of your patterns. So I like to talk about unconscious, subconscious, and conscious. Like, you figured out that you're subconsciously seducing yourself, and that's based on your healthy needs and what you need in the moment. But then when you take the subconscious stuff and you make it conscious, that's when you can work on it. And that's a lot of the, what you're doing in your books, whether you know it or not. You're trying to like help people understand their patterns that are subconscious. That's going to help them regulate their brains at an unconscious level so they can consciously go into the world and show up in a different way.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
And that's all really cool. Just one other thing, and then we can move on to our next talking point is, safety and security we don't realize that we are all trying to find safety and security in different ways in the world. Some unhealthy, some healthy. Those are a lot of those subconscious patterns. And I talk about them a lot in my work. Is, I use something called the Enneagram personality types, because there's different ways of doing it, but in the Enneagram, there's 9 personality types, and each type has a basic fear and a basic desire. The fear is the thing you're trying to stay away from. The desire is the thing you're trying to get. And the Enneagram is basically spot on for people who do the personality typing. But the idea is like how you're dealing with this sense of insecurity and feeling safe. And that's really important piece to becoming healthy and having intimacy, being able to communicate. And then of course, when it comes to erectile dysfunction, being able to have erectile function and be able to have healthy intimacy.
Well, I think creating that safety was a big, and understanding that I needed to create that safety was a big help in moving past ED for me. So when I observed sort of why in circumstances that I wouldn't be able to perform and why in other circumstances I could, one of the things I realized is that if I was in a more casual situation and the date that I was with wanted to have sex, after the first date or on the first date or really sort of really quickly,
30 minutes into the
pardon me?
30 minutes into the first date.
Yeah, I was never quite in that situation because I'm an older guy, but I can imagine that being the case with hookup applications and so forth. But nevertheless, what I realize is that my conscious self would be in the situation where I would say, "This is fantastic. She's ready to go. I don't have to do anything." And I am super like, let's go. Like, I don't have to take her out for dinner. I don't have to wine her and dine her. I don't have to do all these things. And yet it wouldn't, and then we get into bed together and I wouldn't be able to get it up. And it would be super, frustrating, embarrassing for me, for her, for everybody. And that's when I started saying, okay, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what of course it matters. Her wants and needs matter. But in the context of me being able to get it up, I have to do these things. She might not care for me singing a song on the guitar. She might not like my kind of music. I'm going to sing her a song on the guitar because I need to see, my unconscious needs to see, how is she going to react? Is she going to say nice things afterwards? Is she going to make me feel good about myself? And so what I learned was, and I think it's interesting because I don't know, I know in Montreal anyway, and I don't know if it's the same in North Carolina. You're in North Carolina, yes?
Yeah, thank God.
So there's
thankfully, because it's 38 where you are, and it's 80 something where I am.
But there is definitely women today than compared to when I dated in my 20s, when I was in my 20s in university, are, and it's a good thing, much more assertive, much more.
It's a bad thing too. I was going to challenge your thought system, but I'll get there in a minute. It's good and bad.
Yes, but I mean, like we've moved away from this dichotomy of virgin whore. Okay, women are allowed to express their sexuality in many different ways, and one of the things that means is that in some cases they don't need or want to be seduced in the same way that
I would contend those are not emotionally healthy women, though. So, like, I would contend, I was going to say to you, anybody who wants to have sex with you in 30 minutes, right? And I just got done talking to, like, for men and women, it exists on a continuum of emotional health. Like, women are being taught to be the objects of sexualization. That's how they're getting validated. And I'm growing up. I have 5.5 children. I have 6 kids, 3 boys, 3 girls. One's my bonus son. But, I'm growing up teenagers and trying to teach them, like, that's not how you need to get attention. But that's how sexual media, all TikTok and all, like, it's all teaching them the way you get validation is by how you look and if you act sexual. So it's swung way too far in terms of health. I try not to categorize things as good or bad. There's healthy or unhealthy. So, like, if you're willing to, just have sex with someone, that is not evolutionarily, sex is for reproduction and it's for pair bonding, for survival. So, like, if you're existing outside of that, it's generally hunting down dopamine in an unhealthy way. So, and then the thing is, what I teach in my 90-day program, I offer a 90-day program for recovery from porn and hypersexuality. So that would be a hypersexual woman. Like, healthy sexuality doesn't want to jump into bed right away. It wants connection. And, it's not prudent. Like, it may be women hyposexual like they were in the past, but at the same time, they're not hypersexual. And in that program, I talk about it as a transformational journey. And the journey is to find your true self, your authentic true self, that the version of you that you know is you and you're comfortable going into the world and you're happy and you're secure and you're emotionally intelligent. And that version of you isn't comfortable with casual sex. You want to because that's where we're at in society and that's what all these apps are doing. But like when you search your soul, you realize I want my true self wants intimacy. But I'm kind of
Well,
working in this framework.
I would go one step further than that, and I would say that once I figured out how to sort of seduce my unconscious so that I could have the casual sex
Mhm.
that I wanted, it became a lot less interesting to me.
Mhm.
And in my experience, the most dopamine releasing hardcore physical sex that I've ever had has been in the context of a meaningful relationship.
Yeah, every person I talk to says
So,
that. And every person, once they kind of come out of this, and you know what you're talking about, it's the ego journey. It's a hero's journey from ego to true self. Like that's every movie in the world's about it. And we all should be approaching our lives about it because that's self-actualization and transformation. And so all the guys I work with, they'll say, that's why like the best sex is actually when you care about someone. And and my friend Chanel, my bestie, I'm always saying, I'm always trying to like, okay, is this like my ego that wants this or my true self? And she's crushing it in her business. And so she buys a lot of high-end things because she likes them. And so I'm like, I don't know if I should buy this because it feels like it's just my ego. And she's like, listen, sister, sometimes you just have to use your ego to help your true self shine through. And so like you using your true self to use your ego to find your true self. Like I know it's all twisted, but that was the journey. That's the middle of the transformational journey. It's kind of like a battle of the wits, like who's actually acting. And I'll use those as barometers in my own life. Like, and I'm always talking about, in my life, I'm an Enneagram 5, a personality type 5. So that the one of the defense mechanisms is avarice. So I'm on a spending freeze half the time. Doesn't matter how much money I have or how much money I'm making. It's really just if I feel stressed. Then I'll
right.
spend money when I'm feeling not stressed. Doesn't have to do anything with bank accounts. It's a barometer. And so like, in your case, it's like your barometer is what you need to do and you're kind of tricking your mind back and forth, which is really interesting to me. And that's the middle of the journey. So how'd you get over the hump to the other side?
Well, I think making this link was huge, and then also thinking like, could what I have gone through apply to other people as
And what
well?
about the strategy? So like when you came up with
Oh,
strategies
okay.
in terms of like maybe let's springboard into like
Sure.
the strategies probably have a little bit of that, kind of like this, that, and then the other kind
Yep.
of journey
Yep.
to them. So like, let's transition to that if you're okay with talking
Well,
about
yeah,
what
for sure.
strategies were you able to use?
I guess I look at different strategies for different scenarios.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's kind of meeting people for the first time, more casual scenarios that I think people are maybe some people, as you say, because of the way society and the sexualization of society, maybe people are more focused on that than they should be. But maybe, as you also say, they've got to go through that journey to get to the other place. So,
Definitely.
so there's solutions for that. Then there's solutions for getting into a meaningful relationship, and solutions if you're in a meaningful relationship and you have ED. And I would say that they all kind of, although there's categories, they all kind of weave, and all of them can apply to each other.
Cool.
So starting with the casual ones, for me, there's, what are you going to do before you get in the bedroom? And the first one, as I said, you've got to use your powers of seduction. Like, and she may not need them. She may not need it. She may not want it. It doesn't matter, guys. Like, you've got to do these things. And we all have our different, we're all peacocks. We all have our different feathers.
Yeah,
And
I
you've
love
got
it.
to do what works for you. In my case, it's, little jokes, dinner, dancing. I'm a terrible dancer, but that's not the point. In some ways, the fact that I'm a terrible dancer works because I'm making myself vulnerable. I'm exposing part of myself, write a poetry, recite something, like it doesn't, do something a bit silly. It doesn't really matter. What you're trying to do is expose yourself, make yourself a little bit vulnerable, a little piece at a time, so that you can see how she reacts. If she reacts in a warm way, you're going to feel safe. All these are little building blocks that you're giving to yourself to create intimacy once you get into the bedroom.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to have to share these tips with Dr. Cosmos Leigh. I hope you're listening. my husband.
Oh, yeah.
Get peacocking, my man. Get peacocking. That's what I'm hearing.
The second one is to get way ahead of the ED issue. So sometime after the first kiss and before you get into bed, just be open about it. One of the things that I found interesting when I began to examine my own ED is I had a couple of really good girlfriends. And so I brought this up with them, not friends that I was dating, but women friends. And I was like totally shocked. They were like, oh yeah, that's happened to me. I've been with guys and this has happened to them. And I was like, what? Like, you're super hot. You're like really confident sexually. I was flabbergasted. And I was like, well, how did you feel? And they both said the same thing. I felt lousy. As the woman, they were like, I felt like I was sexually undesirable. I felt like I was doing the wrong moves. I felt ashamed. I felt all these things. And I was like, that floored me, because I was like, no, this is all my issue. It's not like, if I'm with you in the bedroom, it's because I think you're a very sexy woman and a sexy person. Like, so that really shocked me, and it made me want to protect my future dates, because I didn't want them to feel that emotional, upheaval for something that was my problem. So I started telling people, look, this might happen. Okay, but a little bit of intimacy had been established. There had been a few seduction dates, and then there was a kiss. And then so I was like, okay, clearly we're moving towards an intimate sexual act at some point in the near future. So I would have the conversation, not in bed with them, but like before. And I would say, look, I might not get it up. Okay, and I'm telling you, because if it doesn't happen, I don't want you to feel bad. It's not your problem. I'm just wrapped up in my head. I'm not feeling good. Like I don't know what it is. At that point, I still hadn't kind of figured it out. I'm like, I don't know what it is, but if it happens, it's not your fault. And what a statement of vulnerability.
Totally.
You cannot, and ironically, just doing that, once I did that, I never had a problem in bed.
See, now it's different, unfortunately, for men who watch porn, because they don't want to tell their partners, especially if they're married and they've been married for 20 years, they don't tell their partner, oh, my now problem is because of this habit I've had for 40 years I haven't told you about. It's very difficult for people to take the cat out of the bag on that one. And that is the underlying issue. And then that needing hyperarousal, like there's no solution until their brain is regulated and communication with their partner. And I love what you said, not in bed, because that's really important. I try to tell people, you need to talk to your partner about these things. And I encourage people to, when they're married, at least, because life goes by fast each week, is to have just weekly check-ins where it's like you're not calling each other out on anything. You're just like, okay, this is where I'm at emotionally and physically. These are things that are going on, if not at least once a week. In those talks, those are the times to say, like, I'm hoping we can have more of this, in the bedroom or anything like that. And that it's addressed in a healthy way. And I love what you said about when partners don't know that their husband or boyfriend's watching porn and they can't perform, they immediately think it's them and they're not attracted to them, which unfortunately is also a part of porn consumption. They become less attracted, and it's this whole Pandora's box of a bunch of stuff that needs to be addressed. So that's tricky because that doesn't always work, because if they tell when someone's wrapped up in porn, if they tell their partner, doesn't always automatically make it better.
For sure. I can absolutely see that one, especially when porn, a lot of porn is involved, or some porn, or for sure.
Yeah, and especially when there's secrecy. Like, I'm always like, you gotta let the cat out of the bag when you're ready. And once you've recovered from porn addiction or porn consumption, you're well on your way, which the ED will be on its way to. It'll to being gone. Then you can start, really practicing healthy sexuality at healthy levels of arousal.
Yeah. So I found that just like, getting way ahead of this ED issue and having these conversations was really, really beneficial.
Definitely, that's awesome. I love it.
Other things kind of in line with this was just, slow things down. Like, I wouldn't have sex on the first date anymore. Well, it wasn't going to work anyway, so what's the point? And so I would kind of stall and drag things out and do more of these seduction techniques. Another one was just to be, and again, this is in a more casual context, but just be sober. Don't drink at all. There's enough stimulation going on between the hormones and the pheromones and the sexual excitement. You don't need to put alcohol in the mix. And I think that I was like, okay, I know I'm having performance anxiety, so if I can just have the right number of drinks, then enough to make the anxiety go away, but not enough to can't get an erection. Well, then my performance anxiety was on how much am I drinking? Did I drink the right amount or not the right amount or whatever? It's like, so just don't
take it out.
Take out the alcohol. Don't get high.
Well, they're depressants, so they're depressants. They're going to worsen. They're going to worsen the situation, is the reality. Exactly. And yeah, they'll take the edge off your anxiety, but in terms of performance, they're going to worsen the situation.
Or physiological, what they do, or to your brain, yeah, they're depressant, so it's not going to help. Another one that I found for me was to just be in my home. So if it's a casual situation, like make that have home field advantage. If your unconscious is going to feel safe anywhere in the whole world, it's probably your room. You know where the condoms are. You know where the bathroom is. You're just it's your safe space. So don't do it at their place. Do it in your place.
That's great. Easy one. That's an easy home field advantage.
Yeah,
Love it.
Exactly. And then another one, sort of before you get to the bedroom, which I didn't use, but I think could be effective, would be meditation. And what I would meditate on would be acceptance, accepting that I might not get it up, and that's okay. And I think
that's probably difficult for a lot of people, but what meditation does is it brings your brain out of that pendulum effect, that I call it, in closer and closer to the optimal zone. So it's an awesome strategy, because if you're psyching yourself out, your brain's just going like this. And if you meditate, your brain's going like this, you're going to have a higher likelihood of success. So you might as well break out the tools that work. Yeah, I love it. It's great.
I would say one thing that just to go back to saying that you had ED, or saying when I would say that I had ED, I think not only does it like just bring down the level of expectation, but you're also creating this space that, first of all, you're removing the expectation on yourself to get it up. You're removing the expectation on your potential partner, that she has to do something to make that happen. And you're creating this space where you can kind of say, we can have great sex, or we can have fun without me getting an erection. And so
I was going to ask, the next question I was going to ask is, what if you can't get an erection? Do you have a game plan there that helps it to, because performance anxiety comes out of the performance, which it's supposed to be an experience, not a performance. So like, how do you use your mind to bring yourself back to an experience, not so much the performance aspect? You have any strategies there?
Well, I think that sort of dovetails into what happens in the bedroom. Okay, so you've said these things, you've done the seducing techniques, you've slowed things down, you've let her know that, or I suppose even him know that that it's not gonna work. You're not sober. You're in your home. You've done your premeditation, and now is the time you move into the bedroom. So what I want to do is maximize the possibility of intimacy. Okay, so some things are very simple, and some things are more complex. So light a candle or two. Don't have sex in the dark. You want to see your partner. Maybe you don't want to see every, scar. I don't want someone seeing every acne scar that I had when I was a teenager. So I don't need the full lights on. I'm 50 years old. But a couple of candles.
It's not like an exam. What's going on?
we can all look like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie if we have just the right lighting, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
So use very soft lighting. Look your partner in the eyes. Have sex, make love with your eyes open.
Totally. Lights on, eyes open. That's one of my strategies. Yep.
It's very basic, but it's a great way to create intimacy, but it's a bit scary.
I know. So my sister said super long time ago, she's like, about my husband and I, she's like, you two probably keep the lights on when you have sex. So I'm like, you don't?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like flip those lights on, sister. Let's go. Because how do you share an experience? And we know the senses are involved. We're trying to make it a multi-sensory experience, because when it comes to arousal, the more senses you can get on board to, like you said, bring your brain down and just be present and allow yourself to be in the experience. So I love it. I think it's great.
So one of the things that I would counsel against, because it didn't work for me in the bedroom, was receiving oral sex. So I don't think that, generally speaking, if you're with someone for the first time, or you're having difficulties getting an erection, physically, it's not an intimate position. Your head is far away from her head. So you can't look each other in the eyes, except unless you're sort of, depending on how you're positioned on the bed, but most of the time you're not, both of your eyes are closed, so you're far away from each other.
It is an objectification type of position. So, and it's a hyperarousal event. So meaning that there's more stimulation generally than there is when it's, relational sex. Actually, relational sex, not that, you can switch it up and do anything you want. But when you're being intimate from a neurological standpoint, you want to connect your brains, your hearts, your gut. Your gut has a lot of neurons in it too. And then of course your genitalia. But when you're connected, you're basically syncing your nervous systems. And we know that nervous systems attune, and that's how you can share an intimate experience. And that is an important thing.
Absolutely. And I think that on top of that, and this, to talk about porn, to make a second porn, is that, a blowjob just has this massive expectation and pressure on both people that it's going to lead to an erection. And where does that come from? That comes from porn. Totally. Because
not just oral sex either.
There's not one blowjob in all of porn that did not lead to an erection. And I promise you, that is not reality.
Yeah.
That is not reality. There's like, how many millions of depictions of blowjobs are there, and they all end up in an erection. But if you talk to, or if you ever hear of porn actors or actresses, they're telling you, oh, there was a fluffer, and it didn't work this time, and it didn't work that time, and the director was frustrated, and finally the guy got it
totally
out.
Yeah, so and sometimes there's injections. Right. There's
this kind of conscious conception that, okay, the guy's having problems getting it up, let's give him a blowjob. But I always found that if I was freaking out thinking about it, it did not help. It just made it much, much worse. And then I felt terrible because I was like, oh, I'm not getting it. And then she felt bad because she's not doing it the right way. No, totally. So just take that out of it.
Yeah.
On the
And
flip side,
if I can take that one step further, and then as long as you're going to remember the flip side is
yeah,
that when it comes to people who watch porn, I talk about it as an arousal template. So the thing they've watched a lot, and oral sex is one of them, but there's lots of them. The thing they've watched a lot becomes the thing that has the highest arousal. So then if you're having difficulty becoming aroused, your brain, your dysregulated brain goes, let's go to that thing that gives me the most arousal. And oral sex is a really good example of that. But it takes you away from your actual goal of getting an erection and connected sex, because the people I work with, they're trying to get rid of that, but then they don't realize it. They're inadvertently going back to those old dopamine pathways of these level 15s to try to, and because the journey can be messy, like it doesn't go from erectile dysfunction to function. You have to do these things in practice. And
for sure.
and I love what you're talking about, like it's practice over time, and stay away from this and focus on that. And that's really
Yeah.
true. So on the flip side, what are you gonna say on the flip side?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think again. So you're in the bedroom. You've got the lighting on. You're looking each other in the eyes. You shy away from receiving oral sex as the man. But on the flip side, I do think giving oral sex can be can be can facilitate a man
I
getting
like where your
erection.
head's at, Will. I gotta tell you.
So I'm not hearing
Are
any
you listening,
complaints.
then? 'Cause-
Right. So and why is that? Well, because I mean I have this little saying that may be appropriate here, where I'm like, what is the difference between bad sex and good sex? Well, the difference between bad sex and good sex is, okay, we might have to edit this part out. I'm sorry.
Sure, that's okay. Okay, pull it out, man. I hear you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so when I think about these things, it makes me think about um, so why would going down on a woman facilitate an erection? And it makes me think that the difference between bad sex and good sex. Well, in bad sex, the man doesn't get an erection. That's not very good sex. The difference between good sex, bad sex, or good sex and decent sex is that the woman comes, and the woman and in good sex, great sex, the woman comes and she just keeps coming. Okay, so if you can,
which also might be porn influenced, everybody.
possibly, but if you can please your woman as a man, I felt great. And once I knew that she was satisfied, my pressure on myself went down, and so then I could get it up.
Totally,
So I think
100%.
That's the point that I'm trying to make there, which is
I love it. I think, and the way I talk about it, is like, service to each other. In services, I know it feels like a loaded word, but it's like you're not just in it for what you get, you're in it for what you give and share. And that's
right.
a totally different framework than in porn, and in porn influenced minds and brains. They call it the narcissistic bubble. It creates a lot of narcissism, like, okay, I'm going to use this person to get pleasure. I'm going to do this to get pleasure. It's me. What can I get out of this? And when you flip the switch on that to what can I give within this context, and what can I share, give and share, instead of take and get, now you're in a different situation than you've been in before.
And giving is such an important part to having sex, whether it's a casual situation or whether you're with a long-term partner.
And that's why I say give to receive, and like focus on giving, and then also know what your healthy arousal template is. And so, like, oral sex usually isn't in the healthiest, especially in porn recovery. We know that. So like,
right.
It's shared, something that's shared, not just taken. And then, if that is in the mix, make sure there's giving and taking, and that everybody's having a good time, not just you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that's exactly the way that I talk about it. I love it. Okay, so let's transition because we only have a few minutes left. Let's transition to like in terms of how someone gets support. What was your journey in that? I know you went to see a lot of people, and just to share, and I was talking to Will about this before we jumped on, is that the biggest thing I'm focused on these days is erectile dysfunction because people come into my program as the two biggest goals. Actually, this was like, I don't know why, it was like a wild epiphany to me. I'm very focused on letting people know that porn is at the core of their problem. And that's the case for the majority of people who have erectile dysfunction. We know that science is proving young men's erectile dysfunction off the charts. But so, the thing I was going to say is that I'm focused on it because relationship problems, either establishing them or keeping a relationship after having a porn habit or addiction, and erectile dysfunction are the two biggest pain points that people have. So I've started to make a lot of content on erectile dysfunction because that's what people are suffering with. Like, they don't actually want to give up porn. That's the actual problem, but the symptoms are erectile dysfunction and relationship problems. So I've been focusing on the symptoms so that, people can know like that symptom's coming from this arousal problem that you have, whether you know it or not. So I'm trying to help people to understand that. And so long story short, I'm putting together a digital program. It's already put together. I just have to record it on erectile dysfunction. And I'm also creating a playlist on my YouTube channel of all the solutions for erectile dysfunction from free all the way up to top tier and kind of breaking those down for people. And the free ones are using your mind and your body in this way, learning to use the tools you already have, your mind and your body. And then moving on up to the top tier is using technology to regulate your brain, which is the top tier service that I offer people in terms of neurofeedback coaching. And I do something called brain mapping. So what did kind of your recovery and support look like? And what do you think people might need?
Well, I think, certainly for me, I would say that as much as a few of the solutions that I mentioned from my book, I've talked about here.
Yeah, and could you share the titles of your book? Because I don't think you shared the titles of your books when we were recording.
Oh, sure. Well, the self-help book is called The Mystery of the Missing Erection. Mm-hmm. And the novel that I've written is called Mother, simply. There might be some Freudian aspects to that. I don't know. You have to check out.
Yeah, we can psychoanalyze that at a different time, right?
That's right. And they're all available at mothernovel.com. So both of them are available there. But I think that where therapy, I see therapy playing a larger part is in longer term relationships. That certainly getting back to the romance and getting back to doing the seductive actions and doing these things both before you think you're going to have sex and then when you're in the bedroom certainly apply to longer term relationships. And I would definitely, get back to date nights and it's, I'm sure it's give and take. Like if you're in a cycle where you're not being seductive within your partnership, men, you've got to go make those peacock overtures and you've got to, do romantic things, do the things within yourself that make you feel vulnerable. And then the women also, maybe it's a bit awkward if they're doing something that they haven't done in 20 years to try and get your attention. You've got to receive it. You've got to be encouraging of it. You've got to say, that's the most amazing whatever that, I've seen in a long time.
I was telling in the group that I was in, but I try not to say triggering things, especially in the group that I'm running. And I was talking about how we went out last Friday night and I wasn't going to change because I was comfy. But then I was meeting my husband at the bar and I'm like, it's totally going to be great if I walk in like wearing things that I know he likes. And so I wore these like strappy heels. I know it's triggering for some people, so I was trying not to. It's so funny. I walk in, I look great too. Like, I had it was just pants and like I had a strappy tank on. I didn't look trashy at all. And then I walk over to him. It's so funny. And he looks down at my feet and he goes, "You look great." I'm like, "You're looking at my feet." And he goes, "Your feet look great." But I knew he would like those shoes. So that's a way that I, was trying to, be playfully seductive in a, out in the world, but instead of showing up in my jeans and the boots I was wearing, you know what I mean? So it was an E for effort on my part. And all those things, especially when you've been married for a really long time, like those things can go
Yeah.
a long way when it's just a little thing that you do to, show your partner I care enough to do this because I know you're going to like it. So very cool.
So I think doing those things are important. And then I think therapy is a big, I think it's a big part. I think, you know, emotional type therapy and also the therapy work and the coaching work that you do would also have a
Yeah,
huge
the coaching's huge. And
impact on that.
like, but going back, if it's okay if I just springboard for a second, is that we've talked about this is an unconscious, subconscious, and conscious problem. You cannot talk yourself out of the unconscious part. If your brain has been damaged and dysregulated by porn, and that is a true thing, or from something else, severe anxiety has a similar brain pattern. Like if you've suffered with anxiety for a long time, if people don't know this, it's the brain pattern that makes it difficult to be aroused in a healthy way because you're in your head so much. So, like, there could be a dysregulated brain pattern in there that is at the core of your problem that you cannot think or talk yourself out of. That's why when I work with people, we do a brain map. I can see exactly how your brain is performing. And then we start using neurofeedback, which is technology that optimizes your brain performance. Doesn't put anything into your brain. It teaches your brain to make more of medium speed, calm focus, less of that stressed out, overwhelmed speed. And I'll do that for 30 days usually. And then I do coaching strategies and we focus on the subconscious and the conscious, all the stuff that you're talking about. That's the stuff that, and I don't talk about it. I don't go, oh, okay, let's discuss this. I say, what are you doing right now? And then I'll say, those things are creating this for you. And I'll give people 3 coaching strategies, usually 3 to 5. And I'll say, do this, do that, try them and see what happens. And when people try those strategies, then their brains get in that middle mode, their neurofeedback works better. So it's synergy, it's synergistically using unconscious, subconscious, and conscious, and it totally works.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that's the top tier solution. So, like, if you've gone to therapy and you've been talking about this stuff for a long time and you haven't shifted, you might just be dealing with conscious or subconscious and you haven't touched the unconscious. And when I do a brain map, it's just so obvious. Like I talked to a gentleman, I talked to a lot of people. I did a brain map and I was going over it with a gentleman yesterday. And I'm trying to think how many. I think it was 12 areas of his brain were 6 levels away from optimal. Like in the pattern from porn, which means like he can go do 75 other strategies. They're never going to work until he shifts himself. And I told him the things that need to happen after we start using the technology what I said to him was, I have to lovingly call out the elephants in the room right now. And they're big elephants that he's ignoring. I'm like, you need to deal with that elephant, and that elephant, and I can help you. And then the coaching strategies are surrounding the idea of dismantling those elephants in the room, which brings the nervous system down and allows you to be in healthy arousal. So that's why I'm so passionate about putting this program together, because I'm like, this is the pain point. And for people who can't commit to a big porn recovery program, because my 90-day program is a big one. And, it's an investment, first of all, but investment of time, money, and energy. And some people don't want to do it out of the gates. So now I'm going to have a smaller program that's like, okay, these are at least the things that you need to do to get moving in the right direction for ED if you're not ready to like do the whole overhaul of the inner child,
Right. Well, and I do think that looking at if intimacy is cornerstone to getting an erection, especially if it's this kind of psycho-emotional ED, then talking with your therapist about what were your patterns of intimacy as a child, what were your patterns of intimacy in previous relationships to the one you're in, or at the beginning of the relationship that you are in. All of these are going to have a factor. And also, where do you want to go with your sexuality? What is the vision that you would like to have as a sexual being, alone and with your partner?
Definitely. Nobody talks about it. Like, I know. And to have an emotionally healthy person to springboard that off of and to help you figure out, that is like the work of the figuring out the subconscious stuff, all those programmings from the past.
Yeah.
That's part of the 90-day program that I offer, is digging into your patterning, where it came from, how to update it, update the programming so that you can have the life that you want to live. And therapy is hugely powerful for that, for sure. Definitely. That's awesome. Okay, sorry, I have to wrap up. So first of all, thank you so much for joining me, because this has been a really fun conversation, and I think it's going to bring a lot of value to a lot of people. And thanks so much for all those strategies. I think they're really helpful in helping people, overcome the idea of it, and then actually have practical steps that they can take to set themselves up for success instead of for struggle and challenge. So I totally appreciate that. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I mean, I guess the thought that comes to mind is that I think this is pretty normal, having ED. I think obviously if your ED is porn related, you want to speak to an expert, and you want to get the right coaching and the right program to help you with your addiction, for sure. But I do almost think that there's two kinds of men. There's ones that have had a problem with ED, and there's ones that will have a problem with ED. That this is just part of being a man. It is a solvable problem. You can get through it, and you got to keep trying. You got to keep doing the things you're doing. So
yeah, I love it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. And remember, control your brain or it'll control you.